A landmark review into the UK's biggest maternity scandal finds more than 200 babies and 9 mothers could have survived with the right care. The inquiry concluded Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust made repeated errors and did not learn from its own inadequate investigations.
If they'd have listened to me from the beginning, you know, Jack probably would have been here today.
In what way?
I repeatedly asked for a caesarean.
We now know that this is a trust that failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve. This resulted in tragedies and life-changing incidents for so many of our families.
Well, the report raises 15 areas needing immediate and essential action in all maternity services in England. The other news this lunchtime. Attacks in East Ukraine intensify as Russian forces regroup, with heavy shelling reported on the front line in Donetsk. 4 million people have fled Ukraine, with another 6 million displaced inside the country, according to the UN. The parole board says the mother of baby P, jailed for his death 13 years ago, should be released from prison. Cricket fans pay their respects to the late Australian bowler Shane Warne at a state memorial service in Melbourne.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Australia are through to the final of cricket's Women's World Cup, dismantling the West Indies by 157 runs in Wellington.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. A damning report into maternity services at Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust has found catastrophic failings over 20 years. The inquiry, led by the senior midwife Donna Ockenden, found that more than 200 babies and 9 mothers who died might have survived if they'd got the right care. Ms Ockenden described the culture at the trust as appalling and said failures in care were repeated from one incident to the next. Well, the review, covering more than 1,500 incidents, is thought to be the largest of its kind in NHS history. It spanned a time frame of 20 years, from 2000 to 2019. And it identified 15 immediate and essential actions which must be implemented by all trusts in England providing maternity services. The Trust has apologised fully for the failures and offered its sincere apologies to affected families. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan is in Shrewsbury, and we can join him now. Michael.
The numbers are truly shocking, unprecedented in the history of maternity care in this country. But what's important to remember is that each single number is an individual family, a family who have grieved a loved one or wondered why their child is profoundly disabled. And too often that grief was compounded by the fact that the trust lied to them and failed to investigate what had actually happened. Today, those families found out the truth, and I may warn viewers that some may find my report distressing. This is what justice looks like. Families failed by the NHS, now vindicated by the independent review they had placed their faith in.
Good morning, everyone.
At the centre of the gathering, Donna Ockenden, the woman who delivered a devastating critique of maternity care at the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust.
We now know that this is a trust that failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve. This resulted in tragedies and life-changing incidents for so many of our families.
The review team found that at least 201 babies might have survived with better maternity care. 9 mothers could also have survived. 94 children sustained life-changing harm, such as cerebral palsy and brain injury.
This is all the more concerning when it is clear that major issues in safety were apparent in both midwifery-led unit and consultant settings. Unfortunately, these cases were not isolated incidents, and through the time span of our review, we have found repeated errors in care which led to injury to either mothers or their babies.
The review, which started in 2017, was set up to look into 23 cases at the Trust. By the time it closed, more than 1,000 families had come forward, the largest inquiry into maternity care in the history of the NHS.
I went in on Thursday, waters was leaking. They didn't induce me till Saturday.
Hayley Matthews was left in labour for 36 hours.
If they'd have listened to me from the beginning, you know, Jack probably would have been here today.
In what way?
I repeatedly asked for a caesarean and I was knocked back every chance.
Jack was born in a poor condition and died just 11 hours old.
They literally said, we don't know why he's died. And I said, well, is that it? You don't know why he's died? And then they said, well, we don't know what else to tell you. And I was like, well, I want a post-mortem because a baby just doesn't just die.
Today, Hayley thanked the woman she felt had fully uncovered the extent of the problems.
She generally cares. It's not, you know, it's not another baby and another number. She genuinely cares about each and every one of us. And as she says, we're her family.
Any notion that these were historical problems was firmly rejected by today's finding, with Donna Ockenden saying she was very concerned about the quality of current maternity care. The Trust haven't yet addressed those criticisms.
Today belongs to the families who've been failed by our Trust. And as the Chief Executive now, I want to apologise fully for those failures, and nothing can take away from the pain and distress caused.
Each family now wants the NHS to embed each of the recommendations within today's reports across the UK. It's nothing more than the lost children deserve. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Shrewsbury. The key question, of course, is why did this happen? There are a number of reasons. There was a lack of investigation into many incidents, but not only that, the Trust devised their own investigation system at one point, which the Trust says appears to have been explicitly designed to prevent them from having to tell outside regulators what was going wrong. There was also failure of basic competencies, forceps deliveries were carried out wrongly, the misuse of labour drugs, and there was a culture for many years of trying to push women to have normal births, way beyond the point where they should have done, with catastrophic consequences. The key now is to embed the changes not just at this Trust, but at maternity units across the country, because most people accept that many maternity units have similar problems.
Michael, thank you very much. Michael Buchanan in Shrewsbury. If you've been affected by this news story, details of organisations offering information and support are available at bbc.co.uk/actionline on our website, or you can call free at any time to hear recorded information on 0800 077 077. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed scepticism about Moscow's plan to scale back its forces around Kiev and the northern city of Chernihiv, which was announced after talks yesterday between the two sides. He says he'll judge Russia's offer by concrete results. The governor of the northern Chernihiv region says that he's seen no let-up overnight, with airstrikes hitting civilian infrastructures. US and Ukrainian officials say Russia is continuing to reposition forces away from Kiev, likely to be as part of an effort to refocus on eastern regions. Anna Foster reports now from Lviv.
Amid so much destruction, it's hard to believe that change is coming. Ukrainian forces say they've recaptured what's left of Irpin, north of Kiev. After yesterday's peace talks in Turkey, Russia said it would scale down its military operations in this region. But this morning, shelling still echoed around the capital, and that means the claims of a Russian pullback are being met with scepticism.
Yes, we can call positive the signals we hear from the negotiating platform. But these signals do not silence the explosion of the Russian shells. Of course, we see all the risks. Of course, we see no reason to trust the words of certain representatives of a state that continues to fight.
Some people are returning home, though, to a city that's changed forever. In Kiev, they watch to see if Russian forces are leaving, and they'll wait to see if they come back. But many Ukrainians are still far from home. Ivan is just 17. He escaped from Kharkiv, leaving his mother and family behind. Now he and his girlfriend are living on the floor of a theatre rehearsal room.
When you go out from the basement, the shockwave from the explosions throw you against the wall. And it's like the second sun.
Your mother is still in Kharkiv. That must be hard for you.
What can I say? It's a bit painful. In fact, it's too painful. Mama said, you have to be ready for any situation, because every call can be the last call.
In the east of Ukraine, millions of people are still living under heavy bombardment. And in Donetsk, homes have been shelled again. It's another reason why Ukrainians are bracing themselves for a long and painful conflict. Anna Foster, BBC News, Lviv.
Well, we can speak now to our correspondent Jenny Hill in Moscow. And Jenny, any suggestions that there has been a breakthrough of any sort from these talks now being played down?
Well, the Kremlin say no breakthrough, nothing really of note in those negotiations. It's interesting, actually, because a little earlier, the Russian foreign minister said that Russia is committed to cooling tensions in Ukraine. But, you know, look at the evidence before us. It's very difficult to take that statement seriously. We heard from the negotiators yesterday that they want to reduce dramatically military activities around Kyiv and Chernihiv. They said this isn't a ceasefire. They also said they'd publish details about that de-escalation. They haven't done so yet. At the same time, the Kremlin has announced it plans to intensify its efforts in the east of Ukraine. It wants to, in its words, liberate the Donbass region. Moscow's demands haven't changed, and they, of course, include that Ukraine effectively hand over territory to Russian control. And the language is still very belligerent. Just after the negotiations broke up yesterday, a foreign ministry spokeswoman went on the television saying that Ukraine had to be denazified. And that's before we've heard from Vladimir Putin. We're told that he will be looking at the Ukrainian proposals brought up yesterday. We haven't heard what he's got to say about them. But this is a man who has repeatedly cast Ukraine, NATO, the West as enemies of Russia, entities which intend a threat to Russia. The big question, of course, is what does he really want in Ukraine and how far is he prepared to go to achieve it?
Jenny, thank you very much. Jenny Hill in Moscow. In the southeast of Ukraine, Russian forces have refocused their military campaign. Our correspondent, Wira Davis, has been in the town of Orikhiv to meet some of the civilians living close to the front line.
A street market in Orikhiv, southern Ukraine. At first glance, nothing out of the ordinary. But this is a town right up against the front line with Russian forces. These people are only out on the streets and shopping because they have to. The local supermarket closed weeks ago, and this village is far from safe. We just want peace. We can live without a lot, she says. But tell them, the Russians, to stop bombing us. Over 2 visits to this town, we've seen and heard numerous explosions. Russians shelling the southern front.
This village is the last one before the front line. Shells land in these fields periodically, and the next village down the road is occupied by Russian troops, and civilians have been killed in these villages. Now, many younger people have left here already, but others, in particular the elderly, they remain, but they know they're taking a big risk.
Lida's modest farm is right at the edge of Orikhiv, the most exposed, dangerous part of town. Her sick husband and children are safe a few miles away, but she remains looking after her crops and animals. She takes me to see where she sleeps. Not in the house, but in this cold, damp cellar. Primitive cover from the Russian shells.
I'm hiding here in this bunker because they're bombing us and attacking from each side. I hate them. I hate them. We used to live in peace and we were happy.
In a small town where war is an unwelcome visitor, everyone's adapting quickly. Doctors from Orikhiv's small hospital, nurses and first aiders given a crash course in battlefield medicine and dealing with trauma. They're keen to learn, but they know this is serious. Shortly after we left Orikhiv, we got a call from Lida. There'd just been a big attack. One shell landed in her field, more in the town itself. Shaken but determined, Lida stayed and spent the night in her shelter. Warne Davis, BBC News.
More than 4 million refugees have now fled Ukraine since the start of the conflict, according to the UN. Here, the government says more than 28,000 applications have been received under the Homes for Ukraine scheme that allows individuals, charities, community groups and businesses to volunteer accommodation for refugees. Around 2,700 visas for the scheme have been granted. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning is here. So how well is the scheme really working?
Well, even the minister today admitted that it's not perfect. I think that is possibly a generous interpretation. Look, let's start by saying the British public have been enormously generous. More than 200,000 people signed up to say that they were interested in having Ukrainian refugees in their homes. But the figures today suggest that, the government released new figures today, only 22,500 applications have actually gone through. And that's because the matching process, you have to find a Ukrainian that wants to come and the Ukrainian has to find you. That is mostly being done on Facebook still. And of those applications, only just over 2,500 visas have actually been granted. So that's a very, very small amount of people. And the big problem on that is the delays to issuing the visas. We've been hearing stories from people waiting 10, 11, 12 days to get the visa permission once their application's gone in. We've been speaking to Gary. He's hoping to bring over Yulia with her daughter. Yulia's in a refugee centre at the moment in Poland, sleeping on camp beds side by side. He can't bring her over at the moment. They've been waiting 10, 11 days. Another man bringing over a family. They're sleeping on the floor in an office in Poland at the moment. So the delays are really causing problems for people. The government minister admitted it wasn't perfect. They know they need to do it faster. They're saying they're streamlining the process, but the delays really are causing misery for people.
Lucy, for the moment, thank you very much. Lucy Manning. The Labour leader has repeated calls for Boris Johnson to resign over the parties held in Downing Street during lockdown. At Prime Minister's questions this lunchtime, Sir Keir Starmer said the police had concluded there was what he called widespread criminality. Mr Johnson said he was getting on with the job. There were also clashes over the cost of living, as our political correspondent Ione Wells reports.
Tory MPs off to a party last night, their first big bash since COVID rules were lifted. Not too long ago, some of them had called for the Prime Minister to go after revelations of parties in Downing Street during COVID restrictions. A stone's throw away from the dinner is the COVID memorial wall, a year old yesterday. Some bereaved families gathered outside as MPs arrived. A reminder of the anger felt by many over breaches of lockdown rules by some of those at the heart of government.
Are you expecting to find in the post, Prime Minister?
Boris Johnson previously told MPs that COVID guidelines had been followed in Downing Street at all times. The 20 fines issued yesterday by police confirm otherwise. Today, he was under pressure to update his statement.
He told the House no rules were broken in Downing Street during lockdown. The police have now concluded there was widespread criminality. The Ministerial Code says that ministers who knowingly mislead the House should resign. Why is he still here?
Of course, the Met must, the investigators must get on with their job. But in the meantime, they should. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we are going to get on with our job. And what we are focusing on is tackling the cost of living.
He said they were helping people with price rises after the opposition pushed him on energy bills and national insurance, both going up on Friday. 20 fixed penalty notices for COVID rule breaking have been issued by post so far. More are expected to follow as the police continue to wade through evidence and more than 100 questionnaires sent to people to ask about their involvement in the events. Downing Street have said they will confirm if the Prime Minister or his top civil servant, Simon Case, are fined, but others won't currently be obliged to be named. While opposition parties are still calling for him to go, the pressure from Boris Johnson's own MPs has simmered down. The war in Ukraine focusing minds elsewhere. But if he is found to have broken the law or misled Parliament, that pressure could very soon come back. Ione Wells, BBC News, Westminster.
The time is 1:20. Our top story this lunchtime. A landmark review into the UK's biggest maternity scandal finds more than 200 babies and 9 mothers could have survived with the right care. Still to come, the Channel 4 drama It's a Sin leads the nominations for this year's BAFTA Television Awards.
Coming up on the BBC News channel, England.
Campaigners are urging the government to rethink proposed changes to social care funding in England, which would require people with disabilities to pay up to £85,000 towards their care over their lifetime. Ministers have defended the plans as fair, but critics say it could leave some people without protection from high care costs. MPs will debate the proposals later today. Our disability correspondent Nikki Fox has been finding out the impact the changes could have.
Nadia is 29 and lives with her parents. She has cerebral palsy and is profoundly deaf, and so far she's struggled to get a job.
I would absolutely love to work and hold down a paid, long-term job.
Like thousands of others, she relies on full-time care, which is funded mainly by her local authority, but partly by Nadia from her eligible benefits.
Look, you are lovely, Ted.
Under the government's proposals, only her contribution will count towards a new £86,000 cap, meaning Nadia and others like her may spend the rest of their lives contributing towards the support they need.
I live a simple life as it is. I don't have lots of extravagances. I do not choose to have complex needs, or to need care and support, and I wish I didn't need it, but my life is such that I do. I feel that by making me pay care charges, I am discriminated against because of my disability.
So is that your book?
It is, yeah.
Chloe also needs a fair bit of support. She's a freelance writer, and her first novel is due to be published this summer.
I'm really proud of my achievements, but what people don't see are the financial burdens that I have as well, the things I have to pay for, things like equipment, paying for my wheelchair.
Under the new proposals, she will be able to build up more savings than in the past, but she feels that as a young person who needs support, she doesn't have the same opportunities to progress as others who aren't disabled.
As soon as I hit that threshold, I'll be paying more and more in terms of contributions towards my care. It does make you feel worthless because that isn't an experience that the non-disabled person faces, because they'll never have to think of that dilemma in their mind of, well, if I accept this promotion, that means I'm going to have to pay more for my care.
I think we have to remember that disabled people will be facing discharge up from the age of 18. It's a cap on aspiration of the young. This was the government's one big chance to level up for disabled people, and it has not done that.
The government says the cap is fair because everyone will pay the same towards their care costs. It says it will provide certainty and reassurance. But campaigners say the proposals will leave those who are less well off still facing substantial costs and ultimately disadvantage working-age disabled people trying to get on in life just because they need support to live. Nikki Fox, BBC News.
The Parole Board has decided that the mother of Peter Connolly, known as Baby P, should be released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 over the death of her 17-month-old son. Our correspondent Tim Muffet is here. Tim, remind us about this case.
Yes, well, to recap, Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son, Peter, at their home in North London in 2007. Now, known publicly as Baby P, he had suffered more than 50 injuries despite being on the at-risk register, and Connolly admitted the offence and was imprisoned for a minimum term of 5 years. Her boyfriend received a 12-year sentence and a life sentence for another crime. Now, she was let out on licence in 2013 but was recalled to prison 2 years later for breaching her parole conditions. And her case has been reviewed several times by the parole board since then. This is the 4th review, and the parole board said today that having considered the circumstances of her offending, her time on licence and the progress made while in custody, along with recommendations from witnesses, the panel was satisfied that Tracy Connolly was suitable for release. Now, an official review in 2010 into this awful case revealed widespread incompetence on behalf of social workers, doctors, lawyers and police. And there have been so many questions as to how on earth this baby's death was allowed to happen. The parole board said its decisions are focused on the risk a prisoner could represent to the public if released, and that protecting the public was its #1 priority.
Tim, thank you very much, Tim Muffet. The government has announced that free hospital parking for NHS staff in England will end on Friday. Unions have criticised the decision, which they say will mean additional strain for employees during a cost of living crisis. The fees were waived in March 2020 at the start of the pandemic. The Channel 4 series It's a Sin has led the nominations at the BAFTA Television Awards. The programme tracks a group of gay men and their friends through Britain's AIDS crisis. It's in the running in 11 categories, including Russell T Davies as Best Drama Writer. Our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mazimba reports.
It's a Sin, Channel 4's powerful, vibrant drama about the impact of the AIDS crisis.
Do you seriously think there's an illness that only kills gay men?
It's up for Best Miniseries and Best Writer for Russell T Davies, and 5 of its stars, including Ollie Alexander and Lydia West, have acting nominations. There are 7 nominations for Sky's drama comedy Landscapers, about a decades-old murder, including David Thewlis for Best Actor.
Be back in a minute.
Among those just behind with 6 nominations are Help, a drama about a care home hit by the COVID crisis, and the sitcom We Are Lady Parts, about an all-female Muslim punk rock band. At a time when viewing figures are falling, all awards ceremonies are keen to remain relevant to the public. However, 2021's biggest show by far, Line of Duty, only has 3 nominations in behind-the-scenes technical categories. But the comedian Sean Locke being recognised with a posthumous nomination is sure to be welcomed by most viewers.
Typical, it's typical. That's the attitude you get from her week in, week out.
And there's also a Best Continuing Drama nomination for the now axed Holby City. But the one to beat is It's a Sin. The series inspired the public to raise hundreds of thousands of pounds for the Terence Higgins Trust. It's hoping to also be successful come awards night. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News.
For the first time, more than 10% of the world's electricity has been generated by wind and solar power. But the study by the climate research group EMBER found there was also a big increase in the amount of electricity generated from coal. In Melbourne, a crowd of tens of thousands of people have attended a state memorial service celebrating the life of Shane Warne, one of cricket's greatest ever spin bowlers. The Australian star died of a suspected heart attack earlier this month at the age of 52. Our correspondent Phil Mercer reports.
This was a celebration of an extraordinary life. Both on and off the cricket pitch. Shane Warne was an Australian icon who elevated his sport and took showmanship to a new level. His family has struggled to cope with his sudden death.
Looking forward to a future without Shane is inconceivable. But we do take comfort in knowing that Shane packed more in his life of 52 years, 5 months and 19 days than most people would in 2 lifetimes.
There were powerful messages and musical performances too from famous friends.
Even though he played for Australia, he dismantled England too many times. Everybody on the planet who's seen him play and experienced, I don't know, Warne being Warne, thinks he's one of us.
With Shane Warne, scandal was never far away. He took money from illegal bookmakers, was banned for using prohibited drugs, and his private life delighted the tabloid newspapers. But despite his flaws, he's remembered as a sporting genius.
when he was in the team, Australia believed they could beat anyone, and he had so much gratitude for the era that he played in as well. You know, you're often talked about how lucky he was to play with the legends that he did. He had so much passion for cricket and the history of cricket as well.
Shane Warne said of himself, "I smoked, I drank, and I played a little cricket." Phil Mercer, BBC News, at the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Chris Fawkes has joined us. Is that a rather optimistic looking photo?
Yeah, these are the kind of scenes you could have had yesterday, Martine. If you lived across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, Northwest England, with these kind of temperatures, lovely kind of day actually. But today, well, for some of you, those temperatures dropping by 11 degrees Celsius, for example, in Manchester. Yeah, it certainly feels cold. And there are some snow showers around. This was a Boyne. Often when we do manage to see it turn to snow, it'll be coming down in big chunky flakes because temperatures will just be above freezing. That helps the snowflakes stick together. But this Weather Watch picture shows not much settling on the roads at all. It's mostly over grassy high hills. That's the way of things today. For the most part, it's not going to cause any problems where we do see the snow showers. They'll tend to come in across Scotland and northern England. Now here's our cold front continuing to push southwards across Wales into the Midlands. To the south of that, temperatures still 11 degrees Celsius with a fair amount of dry and reasonably bright weather, although it's a bit hazy. Further north, that's where we've got the cold air spilling in through the day, 4 to 7 degrees Celsius, your top temperatures. Now overnight tonight, this band of mostly cold rain is going to be pushing southwards across England and Wales. Could be a few flakes mixed in, but as temperatures fall in Scotland and across the eastern side of England, we're more likely to see some of those showers switch over to snow, and there could be accumulations, a few centimetres in places. Certainly with a widespread frost, we are looking at the risk of some icy stretches first thing in the morning Thursday across parts of Scotland and England as well. Now tomorrow is a day, broadly speaking, of sunshine and showers, so there'll be a reasonable amount of bright weather around. Showers again though coming in wintry with a bit of sleet and snow mixed in. Temperatures still well below average for the time of year, and we could have some prolonged showers working into Kent. It's not out of the question that we could see a little bit of snow across the highest hills in Kent for a time. Then what follows into Thursday night will be another cold night, a widespread frost, a risk of icy stretches just about anywhere. And for Friday we continue that theme of showery conditions. Quite a strong northeasterly wind, certainly knocking the edge off the temperatures. Not that those temperatures will be particularly impressive for the time of year. It will stay cold, 8 to 10 degrees your top temperature. And this is of course heading into April. Now for the weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, we're going to continue with that rather chilly feed of air. Still the winds coming down from the north or northwest, and there'll still be a number of showers around, still a little bit of a wintry flavour to some of those. However, the cold weather won't last into next week because we are going to see much milder air push back in off the Atlantic, and with that we'll see temperatures rising significantly back above average for the time of year, but that's into next week. Before we get there, yes, there is the risk of a bit of snow and potentially some localised accumulations tonight across parts of Scotland and northern England, bringing some icy conditions. That's the latest.
Thank you very much, Chris. Ice, not so keen. Thank you. Reminder of our top story. A landmark review into the UK's biggest maternity scandal finds more than 200 babies and 9 mothers could have survived with the right care. That's all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we now join the BBC's news teams where you are.